So in a previous video, I made a definition of what most of the 3D printed meat is and explaining some of the characteristics that you. But the point being of why I'm making this video is because I want you to be aware that 3D printed meat is already on the shelf in America. It's not the idea that, oh, hey, look, Italy's already talking about banning it, right? Well, we've been producing it and mass producing it to the point where I can't tell you exactly how many different products you go to the store, how many different types of meat you've gone to the store and go and picked up. Say, for example, you buy a lump of lean cow beef that's raw, what do you call it, ground beef, or you got a chicken leg, or you got a whole chicken body, right? The only way to tell if it's actually fully 100% natural is we assume that we would take it from the bone. However, there are certain things that you're eating that is unnatural entirely at all. And you've actually been eating this whole time and you haven't even noticed it. And it's only happened, I want to say, as far back as 2020, when they start mass producing on the shelf and without our full consent or knowledge. And certain companies are being prosecuted and they're being investigated for this, especially being investigated because they've been doing it illegally without the consent of American citizens and the consent of employees, because they had to sign non-disclosure agreements. And if anybody doesn't know what an NDA is, a non-disclosure agreement, basically it's a paper, a list of documents, that's legal terms of rights and information that says, if I sign this, however your decision or whatever your belief is, I'm not allowed to speak or talk about any of the topic that's related to the matter in this disclosure document at all for an excessive number of years. It can be between 5, it can be all the way up to 700 years. And you think, I'm not going to live that long. Well, no one's going to live that long in that sense. Literally. So why is it that we sign papers over that are that expensive? I mean, there are documents right here in the United States that are non-disclosure agreements where millions of different types of Americans have to sign it, and they far exceed out their own lifespan. Why? Because a lot of the information that they are going to be exposed to is highly classified in a lot of different perspectives. And the reason why it's, disclosed so they're not allowed to talk about it beyond their lifespan is because a lot of the information would disrupt society. It would be very chaotic. Rather, it could be a positive thing in one perspective or a negative thing in another perspective. The fact that some of these things are not allowed to be in society is a question that people should ask. But back to the whole process is, this meat is very dangerous because it is not healthy meat. So you could be picking up at the store and you don't even know it. In fact, actually, Campbell's Soup is one of the very biggest meat products, that they actually can meat, right? They are being questioned and interviewed because their chicken is not natural chicken. They have chicken chunks, right? They put chicken in their Campbell chicken noodle soup cans, and you're eating it. Either you're throwing it in the microwave, or you're making a big pot for some group of family members, right? There's a good portion, about half or more than 50% of the product, not one or two chunks of chicken is in your your can. Almost half or more of the processing plant is filled with this fake synthetic meat. We're not talking about a single can. We're talking about the entire plant is producing this fake meat. I don't know where they're getting it from, either a laboratory or what, but they're producing it, they're putting it in their cans, they're packaging it and sending out to stores, and you're buying it and not realizing that's fake meat. You do not want to believe it, you do not want to know it, because it scares you to believe that you've been eating fake synthetic stuff. Well, folks, you've been wearing fake synthetic clothing since before the 50s. I think, honestly, the first earliest time was about 55, or just about 55, 1955 we're talking about, when we started wearing fake synthetic stuff. We're talking about synthetic fabrics. We're talking about polyester. We're talking about fake synthetic materials such as leather. A lot of these leathers that we're wearing today are not made of cowhide, they're not made of horses, they're not made of donkeys, they're not made of mules, they're not made of any kind of animal that you can go out and go kill, eat, ride, or whatever. They're not made of that. I have a pair of shoes that has, quote unquote, it says leather on it, but it's actually made of fine little cotton hairs that are stretched and tightened, weaved together. It appears to look like leather. It is not leather. It's fake. There is, in fact, actually, like for example, my shirt. You think that's cotton? No, because it stretches. It's a stretchy material. That's actually plastic that's in there. It's called polyester. It's a type of plastic material structure. And 90% of the plastic that we get is not actually from oil. It's actually from corn. Yeah, we're eating corn, like corn on the cob, corn in, cans and everything. But we're also eating it in our food for sugar. High focus corn syrup, right? You're also consuming it in your gas car, right? Every time you go down to pick up gas in your car, a large percent of that is not actually oil that comes out of the ground. It's oil coming off of a corn stalk. You're literally burning corn. You're not burning gasoline that has been procured out of fossil fuels. That is a common misconception. 90% of the time when you're actually burning fossil fuel, either you're driving a diesel or you're actually driving something that actually has a requirement for, fossil fuels. And certain factory plants have to run off of fossil fuels. They cannot run off the synthetic stuff, and they don't tell you the difference in that. And the same thing when it comes to natural gas. There are certain things that are not natural entirely at all, and they're procuring it, and they're making you believe it's actually natural gas, but it's not. There's a bit more that goes into that, but we're going back to the excuse me. We're going to go back to the fake meat stuff, right? You really can't tell by looking at fake meat, because when they show you on TV, like, all these news channels and everything, they're looking at fake meat. It literally looks like this. Like that, it stacks on top of each other because they're just, the machine goes across this way, across that way, across this way, up and down, right? That's what a 3D printer does, right? Well, there is other types of 3D printers that do not create a design like that. They literally structure it in such a way that it actually looks like real meat. There's also genetic manipulation, which has been going on since the 80s or more, where they take single cells and they massively force it to control out of control to rapidly create protein cells. Because some of the protein molecules are not designed properly, the meat actually is disgusting, and it can mold faster. It can make you sick a lot quicker. It can allow for parasites a lot easier because it's never grown inside of an animal itself. Because, say for example, I have this fat in my arm, right? That has fat and has meat inside of it. It is literally partly muscle. But if I took it out of my body, right, and I put it in a petri dish, that is technically edible. I'm not saying cannibalism is acceptable, but I'm saying comparably, if I took a single cell of my hair and decided to say, okay, well, I'm looking for the muscle structure that's in my DNA, and I'm going to rapidly grow it out of control. I put it in a petri dish, and then 9 months later, I get enough meat that's literally as tall as my own body. That is disgusting that can be done, and it's being done in a factory under certain under certain characteristics and things that are be done. And you think that's just out of question. There's no way that's possible. Well, they're doing it to cows. They're doing it to horses. They're doing it to chickens. They're doing all kinds of stuff, and you don't even know about it because you're not even aware that's how synthetic meat is processed. You think that they just take a bunch of junk, like vegetable oil, vegetables, and say for example, other weird material, and smash it and mush it all together, and then they start pouring it into this machine and it starts producing fake meat, right? That's not how it works, my friends. Because if you think that's how it works, that's literally no different than tofu. That's no different than a couple other objects that you're constantly eating of your daily life. The point being is this fake synthetic stuff is really fake, and it's really synthetic. It is massively bioengineered at a level which majority of people are not ready to accept, because it is still part of an NDA. I know this because the fact that some of this technology that's required to make this stuff is highly classified due to the fact that of its own nature is not ready to be accepted. And yes, cloning technology is real. We've had cloning technology for a long time. However, it's not successful. But because we can clone, say a whole animal, which we did in the early 2000s, that sheep that was cloned, just because we can clone one sheep, how can we not clone a single cell that we could have mass produce a meat factory? Think about that. They've been wanting to do this for a very long time. Taking a healthy, good-looking cow and mass producing clones of it so that we can slaughter them all and leave the genetically perfect cow alone so that we can continuously using the information to clone other cows. That was one of the original parameters that they wanted way back in early 2000s. That was their goal. That was their plan. And then the whole sheep thing happened, and the sheep, I don't remember, it was Daisy or something, whatever they named it, right? Within literally a month or so, it died. No, it was actually less than a week. It was a living life form. It was fully genetically cloned. And then it flopped over dead, proving that clones can be unstable. However, just because we've proved that having a clone is not successful doesn't mean you can't clone the cells to produce meat. That is where a lot of the clone structure, not clone structure, but the synthetic meat is coming from. It is taking cells from meat from other animals and mass producing them so that we're eating this fake stuff. But you have to be aware of this because our genetic structure requires us to strip material from other things out of the sources that we're eating. Either say, for example, I'm taking a lettuce or a carrot and eating the whole thing. My body is designed to strip all the material out of it completely down to the cellular level and using all the genetic information in my body to make my body healthy. If I'm taking in something else that is not natural, that is undivine in natural force, and I'm taking that in, that was not created by God, naturally, I'm literally stripping that material into my body and my body is consuming it. So basically, I'm lessening myself. I'm not sitting there saying that I'm accepting something else in my body that is evil, quote unquote. I'm saying that I'm damaging my vessel. The Bible says to protect the vessel and uphold it. And not just protect it and uphold it, it also talks about the fact that you have to keep it clean. You have to keep it healthy. The vessel is the body, which is also a temple. It is also technically considered the church because of the temple. A lot of people think, oh no, it's temple only. No, that's what the church is the body. It's in the same sense of Jesus Christ. If you're an unclean vessel going into a church, you're going to have to be cleansed in a sense, spiritually, quote unquote. But if you're still unclean and you're unrecognized by the members of the church, it can be very toxic because you affect the other members of church. Because it's like taking a moldy, specimen and putting it. For example, a good example is taking a parasite, putting into the cells of a human body, and the human body doesn't even recognize that there's a parasite in there. The white blood cells count is not going to fight it off because it doesn't even recognize it as a parasite. It thinks it's just part of the human body, right? That is dangerous to your body. And there are some parasites out there that they can actually hide themselves in the human body, and the body doesn't even realize they're there. Can they affect you in certain ways? Some of them yes, some of them no. Some parasites are so benign in a sense, they don't do anything, they're lazy. There are some parasites that are very aggressive, and they can be, in a sense, cloaked. Not like literally cloaked, invisible. We're talking about like the white blood cells don't want to react because they don't even recognize them, because these parasites can actually mimic the features of a actual human cell. So it makes itself seem like it's actually a white blood cell or it's a red blood cell or whatever genetic tissue, and the white blood cell says, it checks out, it's clear, it's good to go, everybody's okay, so I'm not going to attack it, right? That's a problem. But on 90% of the basis, we don't actually have to deal with those actual parasites because they're not, everywhere. There's only a random few very cases that people actually run into parasites that are that dangerous. And I mean very rare cases. So when we talk about parasites, we have to realize that there are very few number of cases of parasites that are actually that dangerous on that kind of level. But with this fake synthetic meat, it's very highly likely that we'll see more parasites in our food more easily than anything before. Because if I take a chunk of meat that's actually stripped from a cow, I am more likely to find good, healthy proteins, amino acids, white blood cells that are still active in that blood and inside that cow meat that's defending it from bacteria, other kinds of unclean sources, right? It's defending it like it's a sword and knife. It's going to do everything it can to protect it until it's consumed or until it's burned or whatever, right? Because until it's burned and cooked, the white blood cells have a timer on it, and the same with the red blood cells. They all have a timer on them left because they're not being, recycled or not being sent electrical signals. and their timer starts slowing down. The more the time slows down, because they're not part of the body, not being sent electrical signal from the heart to saying, go do this, go do that, go do, whatever, right? They are only able to defend not the human body, but the chunk of meat for a period of time, protecting it from unclean forces and some bacteria and other things. Eventually, when the process is so slowed down that it's been on the shelf, say, for exactly 3-4 weeks, the white blood cells that are left in there no longer have an ability to function. They're literally dead, and the red blood cells become chunks because they mass collect to each other, and that's when it becomes nasty. And it also means a bunch of other things, but because they're kept at a almost frozen level and almost a really nice temperature, like a refrigerator level, which is like 30s to early 40, 41, 42 is their temperature range, right? Because it allows the red and white blood cells to circulate in the meat as much as possible, which you can't physically see it. I mean, you can see blood dripping off of it, but it allows it to run around like it normally should, and that's what defends the meat. When you cook it, it cooks the parasites with it or other bacteria. That's why it says on the packages to cook at certain temperatures, because you actually are consuming dead, disgusting stuff, parasites, and also bacteria. Not just parasites, but bacteria mainly, and other things, and it cooks it off. Because the white blood cells cannot do a full functioning job, but it will hold it off just long enough for it to actually be healthy, just long enough for you to eat. But that is how concerning a lot of the synthetic meat is, because you're actually going to start eating some really disgusting bacteria, parasites, and other things, because it doesn't have the ability to defend itself. This chunk of meat is unnatural. It is like literally eating this shirt, because it has no natural qualities to it anymore. Like there's maybe 10 or 15% of the fabric is actually cotton. The rest of it's all synthetic. So be careful what you eat, guys, because a lot of that is going to start coming to light. A majority of us have already eaten it. I could have already eaten processed meat, and I never even knew it. It's going to be kind of a shock, but at the same time, is you have to start realizing this stuff has been on the market for some time, because it's kind of complicated, because people don't want to actually start accepting certain things. But the biggest thing that you need to start looking into is money. How much money does processed meat actually produce versus how much money it produces to actually go out and kill a cow, chop it up, bring it to a facility where it can be, completely skinned down to the bare bones, throw it into packaging, send it to a store, and then sold off for some average American citizen, right? So in the process of that, the person who has to kill the cow, either they do it out in the field or they do it in a factory, they have to be paid because they're a worker. The people who are sitting there cutting up the cows and cutting into certain particular places, they have to be paid, right? The company has to be paid. And in order to get them paid, they have to actually package up the meat, and the meat packaging material, like the styrofoam, has to be produced by another manufacturer that gives it to them. So that's making money. That's making revenue. Then it has to be sent out to another company who actually is a shipping company who sends it over to the stores. And the stores are another company entirely that has a license to sell your product. So then eventually you roll around and the revenue comes in a certain amount. So the store gets like 10, 15% of the profit. The company gets another percentage of the profit. And eventually the average worker maybe gets like 10 cents to maybe less than 10 cents per unit of profit that is sold in a store. I don't know exactly the percentage of the profit, but that's a rough annualization of it. But you have to realize that's where a lot of it's sitting at. Also, with it becoming a problem is that the amount of animals that are being slaughtered a year is not like radical, but you have to start measuring the math on it, because the numbers add up. It's the same thing as money. Follow the money and it will lead you to the correct answer, right? So when it comes to animals, about on average, they did an estimate, right, to procure and understand how much cheeseburgers were eaten every single day in a single month by every single company that actually is like McDonald's, Burger King, you can name all of them, right? I don't want to have to sit here and name all of them. The same thing with going into say Walmart or whatever store, they have ground beef, they have patties, they have chunks of steaks and stuff like that. The amount of cows that have to be killed a month is roughly around 97,000 cows a month, possibly up to 100 something cows a month, 100,000 cows a month, right? Take that number and times it by 12. That's how many cows are being slaughtered a year. And a lot of liberals or quote unquote vegetarians are going to be like, I can't believe you're, murdering cows like that. Well, here's the problem. It's not the murdering the cows that's the problem. Is where the hell are we getting so many cows killed a single year to feed 331, I think, or almost 332 million Americans? That is either a baby all the way up to a 97-year-old person, right? Doesn't matter their age or whatever. But where are we getting all the cows to do this stuff? And on top of that, the other countries in the world that are having the same issue, that they're doing the same thing. Now, I was only exclusively talking about the United States alone, but now we're talking about the United States and the rest of the world altogether. United States, Russia, and China, and a couple other countries have the largest amount of land to mass produce farms for cow meats and stuff like that. So we can get away with a certain amount of things, but say, for example, a country like Britain, a large percent of their meat has to be imported from the United States. A large portion of other countries, like, for example, Italy, majority of their meat has to be imported from the United States. Other countries that are, manufacturing cow slaughtering, they have to be imported because they don't have a fair amount of land for farming that big. I mean, think about it. You look at what is called the Great Plains of the United States, which is like which is about 4 or 5 different states that are literally miles of wheat fields, corn fields, etc. Miles of this stuff. And each section of the acres are all owned by different companies and corporations that are mass producing. The same thing in California, some places in Oregon, some other places are in the entire country. But these are just miles of literally just farmland, all producing food for wheat and other things like that. So when you actually add up the numbers, there's a lot of things that need to be questioned. A lot of people have been so blind and arrogant to certain things because they see one thing rather than actually accepting the other thing, because that's the hidden hand. The hidden hand is always something that is kind of cut off and circulated, and nobody wants to talk about it because it's behind the curtain and nobody can see what's behind the curtain. So therefore, we just say it doesn't exist. Because we can't see it, we don't actually believe it exists. But that's the problem. If something is there, but we can't see it, we have to start questioning it. Because if we don't, we're going to be blindly like the rest of the people and start thinking, oh, it's acceptable. Well, look what happened in the last, give or take, 5 years. This last 5 years has been so radical, so untruthful of every abomination you can possibly think entirely, right? So from about 2005 all the way up to now, right? That's 20 years of baloney that we've been force-fed about the transgender thing, right? I'll bring this up into the context. The transgender thing is such a baloney that people are so ignorant not to pay attention that it was all about sexual interactions with each other or with children or their sexual fantasies entirely. Like, we're talking about things that are like, certain things are acceptable when it comes to sexual activity in the bedroom, right? Between you and your partner. I don't give a shit what you decide, right? But when you bring children into it and when you want people to, accept your sexuality, unacceptable. My dog's going off. Hold on. All right, so go back into it. It was how people want to sit there and tell you that my sexuality is more important than your behavior or what you think it is. Like, for example, if I want to wear a stupid onesie, right? That's a furry costume of like a stupid cartoon animal, or say My Little Pony crap, right? If you want to wear that into the bedroom and do whatever you want with your partner, I don't care if you're gay, homosexual, lesbian, I don't care what your fantasy is, right? That is your choice. That does not have to exist in my reality for you to force onto me that it's acceptable for everybody else. I don't care. I really don't care. If you want to go to your bedroom and do some weird, funky things, that is your choice. I'm not going to sit there and tell you you can or can't do it. But it's wrong for you to sit there and tell everybody they have to accept you for who you are because you want to wear it in public. You want to go run around and flaunt your junk around. I'm seriously disgusted by that kind of stuff. I mean, women want to wear their topless, garments around everywhere. Literally, I'm saying garments. I'm not talking about bras. I'm literally talking about every function of clothing wear. They want to walk around topless, right? There are places you can do that. Not every single location, okay? You cannot walk into an elementary school butt-ass naked and make children accept to look at your anatomy, okay? That is literally high school and college level information for them to see. If a 9-year-old is looking at this stuff because you demand them to know what a penis is before they're acceptably ready, especially a 9-year-old little girl who barely has probably started her period, to know what a penis is because she needs to know how it inserts inside of her body. That is disgusting. It's no different than the idea that a 9-year-old little boy needs to know what a vagina looks like because in a year or so he's going to have puberty and he's going to get an erection. It doesn't matter. That is topics laid for later days when he's mature enough to acceptably know. How do we know when a child is actually fully mature enough to accept this? Well, roughly around the edge of high school, which is roughly around between their 17, 18 years old, they're getting mature enough for this activity, right? I'm not saying that they should go out and have sex with everybody. I'm saying that when they hit this age marker, they're going to be looking for a partner. And they're going to be looking to do this with their partner, to be married or not. The point being is, when they're underage, they're not mentally ready for it. So you're pre-programming them to accept it so that they'll actually go out and do it before they're mature enough. And even though we know the human brain is not fully mature enough until roughly about, give or take, 25 to 28 years old is when they're fully mature enough, because their frontal cortex is fully mature enough for them to actually respond to certain things. So when you're shoving into a child's head that it's acceptable, what happens? Well, we have to go to look at rape victims, molested individuals that are underage. If they're not fully knowing what the right is wrong and from right as entirely at all, right? Eventually, at certain points in their entire life, they're going to depend on certain key characteristics that they have to accept as normal. Meaning, if someone wants to touch them inappropriately because it was being done to them as a little kid, because they thought it was acceptable as a little kid and nobody told them otherwise, they will not step away from it. They will not sit there and say, well, I guess that's not okay, because they weren't told otherwise. And it takes a parent to step in because our teachers and our school directors are brainwashed and told it's okay to talk about sexual activities when they're a 5-year-old. I mean, seriously. There's books in libraries in almost every elementary school as of now, because of, not just because of, Joe Biden was in office. This was being done before Joe Biden was in office. Why? Because people did not know what was really going on. So before Donald Trump became president, right? Before he became president, who was the head of the education department? Before Melania Trump took over. Melania Trump took over the education department in 2016. But she had a big mess to clean up, right? Because there was another person, I wouldn't say their gender because it's very complicated to explain their gender because of what they've actually decided to do. But the point being is, before Trump took over in office in 2016, there was another person who was in control of all the education in the United States for every single elementary child in North America you can possibly imagine, and that was Barack Obama's partner. I didn't say wife because that is not his wife. That is his partner. It is a man who has a ding-a-ling and has never chopped it off. For some reason, he has decided that he wants to dress up like a woman and flaunt it around that he's the most amazing female in North America, and every other first lady is a piece of shit compared to him because he gets to act like a woman, and we all have to sit there and accept it, because if we say anything other than his transgenderness, then we're literally sexist. Because he's using femininity to protect himself. He can literally deck a man right in the face, literally like you're being hit with a 2x4. No woman can do that unless they are physically muscular, meaning they have to work out for that exercise. It doesn't matter what their size is, their weight. You have to actually work for that muscle, right? You have to be lifting constantly weight, right? He can literally punch an average man, and yet he dresses like some sexy, attractive woman. I'm not saying that I'm attracted to it. I'm saying that's what these transgendered individuals are trying to make themselves seem like, because they don't want you to know what they are. Especially the ones that have had it wrapped up around your fingertips for such a long time to make you convinced that they are actually a woman. I mean, seriously, it's disgusting. You can literally go into any kind of building you want, doesn't matter what it is. The amount of these freaks, in a sense, you walk in there, you're thinking, oh, I'm just talking to a normal woman, right? You're talking to a person who has a dingling and has decided that they want to dress up. Now, if it's a guy that's dressing up like a woman and actually sits there and tell you, I'm a dude, then it's totally cool, because they're not trying to get into your pants. They're not trying to screw you and then tell you, oh, well, you can't do it in my butthole, but I'm going to do it in yours, because that's the way they roll. But you don't know that because of the fact you think they're a woman, because they mislead you. I think there should be a law that says if you're transgender, I don't care what your opinion is, if you're transgender, before you go on a date with anybody, you have to express the fact that you're a transgender. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. If you're some effeminate looking individual man that is trying to go flirt with men, you need to actually tell them that you're a man that still has a penis and that you want to have sex with them, because that is your desire and your function. You should not sit there and just mislead them and saying, I'm a pretty beautiful woman, you should have sex with me, and we have babies, but turns out you can't because you have a penis. I don't care what your opinion is. That's disgusting, okay? When I was in high school, I didn't think this kind of stuff was going to be this level of disgusting and scary. It's become more and more an issue, okay? I don't have a problem with gay people. Gay people can do whatever they want. Lesbian women can do whatever they want. I don't have a problem with it. If you want to be bisexual, that's your choice. I'm not going to sit there and slash you for it. That's your choice. I respect the fact that you want to make your own decisions. But if you want to drag it into other people's lives and actually invade it and make them feel like they're weak and discerning because you want to overpower them with your opinion that your sexuality is more important than theirs, is wrong. I mean, seriously, we're putting kitty litter boxes in a bathroom for children who think that they want to be a cat, who want to take their clothes off and shit in a cat litter box like a cat does, and then flick the cat litter around. It's disgusting. It is really disgusting. One of these days, it may have already actually happened. One of these days, someone's going to literally strip naked in front of everybody and say that they're an animal and they must actually go to the bathroom like an animal. Out in the open where everybody can see it. Because dogs and cats do it. Horses and cows do it all the time. I've gone out into a field and I've seen horses and cows and goats and other things, including cats and dogs, take a poop and pee, because they don't have a consciousness interaction like we do to know that it's disgusting, or that they care because they're an animal. Not because they're a dumb animal, it's because that's the way that they're designed by God, is they don't actually care about what they're doing. They're just going to do it. A human, on the other hand, we actually have to care because we've been given a consciousness. That consciousness that tells us it's inappropriate, or in any sense of reality, that we actually have to recognize the fact that other people may not accept it as being comfortable. So if I want to pee outside, I need to make sure nobody's looking. But if I want to go flaunt it in front of everybody, then I should be arrested. Honestly, if I walked over to a public school and stripped naked, I should legally be arrested. I don't give a crap what anybody's opinion is. That should be precedented. And there should be a lot of charges on that kind of stuff. But if I decided I want to go up in the woods and decide to get stripped naked up in the woods where nobody can see me, my business. Why? Because there's nobody out there to see me. If I want to walk around naked in my house, that's my decision. But if I'm in public, that kind of stuff is disgusting. If I want to go into a public bathroom and demand there be a cat litter box in there, for me to take a poop in there, for me to take a piss in there, wrong. absolutely disgusting. If I demand people to accept me wearing this fuzzy suit that's I'm naked inside so that I could have sexual interactions with another person who's wearing a fuzzy suit or not, right? Doesn't matter your opinion. That should be completely disgusting. Entirely. That should not even be welcomed outside your own property, outside the confines of certain locations. If you decide for whatever reasons you want to do that, right? You want to do it in your own home, acceptably fine. That's your house. You want to take that up to an apartment, you know, you want to take that over to a hotel, you want to take it to another country, it doesn't matter. As long as you're in public, don't wear it. It's disgusting. It's wrong, okay? It is absolute depriving of human nature to sit there and watch people do this kind of stuff. We have become into a fake reality. And because the fact that, like I said before, this all comes back from Michelle Obama. But her name is not Michelle Obama, it's Michael. And Barack Obama has actually said Michael on a multitude of cases. You can actually look at her birth certificate. It actually says sex, male. It says name, Michael. I don't know what his name was before they were married. It was something else. I don't know what it was. But I can tell you right now, the fact that that individual, that man had full control of the education in our country and dumbed Americans down, frankly, by far disgusting. Especially the first reason why he got in the office was 90% of America was brainwashed to believe, cool, it's the first black president. We needed that guy in office because he's black. I will sit here and tell you that was the first decision that was the wrong choice ever, and massively decision that brought evil into this nation. Why? Because we shouldn't vote on people based upon their skin color. Look at Donald Trump. A lot of people think he looks orange. He's not actually orange. That is actually a lighting adjustment and camera filter feature that CNN has started. They were the first ones to do it back in 2016, and they literally brainwashed people to believe that it's a real skin color that he has. Is he actually orange? No. Go watch Fox News. Fox News, he's pale white. He's literally as pale as my skin, or even paler. I mean, seriously. Do I look orange to you? I seriously don't look orange. I mean, you want to see what orange looks like? Like, this is the color of orange on this box. That's orange right there. Does that look like I'm orange? That's a lot darker skin color. I mean, seriously. People are so brainwashed to believe that, for whatever reason, that whatever they see on television is reality. It's disgusting. We live in a time and date where I can literally go do something so heinous, sinister, and stupid and claim that either I'm transgender, I believe in Satan, or I do any of these other disgusting craps, and I can walk away from it like I've never been committed a crime because I can use certain adjectives to protect myself. I can claim a white cop is racist for arresting me because he's like that. But okay, since I'm white and another white cop tries to arrest me, right? That doesn't look very well, so I'm not going to get away with it, right? Or a black cop getting, to arrest me. That's going to look really horribly, right? Unless I claim I'm transgender or I'm gay. That's the only way I would ever be able to freely walk away from it, because I use certain words and adjectives to protect myself. How stupid is that? If I'm not actually doing something, like, for example, if two gay guys walk into a bar and they're sitting there talking to each other and they have nothing to do with anybody else and they're not hurting anybody, they're not harming anything, right? And a cop walks in there and says, I don't like you fags, get out, right? That cop can get in trouble for doing that, right? However, the offhand, where the cop actually can't have legal rights to actually arrest a gay person for being, doing something they've done wrong, not because they're gay, but because they've actually done something wrong, is, say, they walked up to a guy and punched him, or they walked up to a guy and stripped his pants down and decided to rape him, which that's actually happened on numerous occasions where rape victims actually taken place because gay guys decide that they like someone and they feel like they have to sexually destroy their life right in front of other people. It's actually happened. There are some gay guys that won't control themselves to the point where They literally rub against you physically. I'm not talking about just like, like mentally rubbing against you. We're talking about like physically, like they're touching you. They're molesting you in a sense. They're grabbing your junk. They're grabbing your ass, and they're inserting themselves into you inappropriately in different ways. And no matter what you sit there and say, that's wrong, they'll sit there and say, you're mine. The only way you can get that to stop is if you have a law enforcement that actually says that's wrong and unacceptable. There are situations that have happened like that before, and it's disgusting, and it's disturbing that we have to come to this reality of facing the truth. Even, for example, if the FBI has known collective information on pedophiles in North America, the actual statistic of how many pedophiles live in North America is astronomical. It is literally, I want to say it's about 15 or 20% of Americans that have been registered as pedophiles is literally 15 or 20% of the population. But it is disgusting, and it's a really hard truth to face, because when I found out about it, I was like, why? Why are we allowing these pedophiles to continue doing what they're doing, even though they're registered or they are being watched by the FBI? Which is even more disgusting. If I'm going online and looking up little girls naked, little boys being, whatever done to them, right? Doesn't matter. If I'm doing that, I should be arrested. I don't give a shit how many times a day I'm doing it. It doesn't matter. I don't give a shit if they're actually doing it to a little boy or girl right then and there. To be arrested, it's counted, be legally to be arrested. If they're doing it online, they should be arrested. I think, honestly, they should all be arrested because of what they're doing. If you're sharing the information, you should be arrested. If you're taking photos of a child, you should be arrested. If you're touching a child, you should be arrested. If you're grooming a child, you should be arrested. It shouldn't be after the fact you should be arrested, or it shouldn't because you're actually interacting with the child, you should be arrested. Because on an average daily basis, the amount of children that actually interact with an adult and sexually, intercourse or doing anything like that, or, a man or a woman is taking pictures of a underage minor, everybody thinks it's a low misdemeanor number. It's actually happened quite fairly a lot, because the number, like I said, 15 to 20% of the American population, the number is about 110,000 Americans that are known by the FBI list. The other ones that are not known have either slipped away or they're using the dark web on different sites and channels that the FBI is still mapping the dark web in order to figure them out. And the ones that have been fully mapped out, we're talking about, how to put it this way, is the FBI has full documentation on it to give you a fully understanding of what the dark web is actually fully capable of, not just, your opinion of like, oh, this is where pedophiles go to hang out, this is where Satanists, get elected to do certain things. They actually can auction off body parts of children that they slaughter or they sexually molest or whatever they want after getting done with whatever they've done to the child. They do this all the time. And it's not a fantasy. This is not like, oh, I think this is happening. This has actually happened. There are records. FBI has records. Average police department, sheriff departments have all had records of these cases where they've actually wound up finding body parts or sexual clothing matter, like, little girls' underwear, or say little boys' underwear, because sometimes boys don't really actually wear boxers, not all the time, but, you get the point. Or an entire wardrobe outfit, or a finger, or, a piece of a sexual organ part, meaning foreskin or whatever object you can possibly think about a child's body part downstairs. They actually sell this stuff on the dark web, and the FBI is fully consciously aware of this. They claim they're tracking all this information and trying to go lock down these people and arrest them, but they're not doing it in such a manner to get it done faster, because there are pedophiles across this entire country that are doing it. In fact, actually, transgenderism is the largest pedophilia operation ever taken place publicly, and they're allowed to do it publicly. It is disgusting. It is horribly disgusting. I can sit in a classroom full of anywhere between the age of 3 and 9 years old and sit there and read them a pornographic novel, and the only people that ever get pissed about it is their parents. Yeah, because a child is not allowed to talk for themselves. They're not allowed to sit there and say, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with some guy touching me because I don't have it as self-defense. All right? Whereas these transgender people think that if I come up to you and I touch you, I'm allowed to because I'm quote unquote transgendered and I am allowed to defend myself in this manner. But if a straight guy does it and they're just doing it to be nice and healthy to you because, hey, maybe I'm a doctor or maybe I'm your father and I'm trying to check on you to make sure that you've not been touched yourself, that's evil. So a straight white man doing the job that God has provided them to do is evil versus a transgendered individual who's literally physically allowed to touch you by our society standards without your permission or acknowledgement of your self regiment of your own sexual propriety. It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. And you know what even makes it worse is it is actually satanic. I'm not saying that because, oh, it's a Christian ideal, right? No. These people are flaunting satanic flags. They're out there putting satanic symbols on their body. I've seen tattoos of Baal on their body. And nobody knows what these demonic entities are because they don't read the Bible very well. These entities have demonic figures. Hell, Baal is represented, he's got a couple different forms he represents by. One of the most common figures is a goat human man that has a penis with goat legs, right? And then breast as a woman with an upper body of a woman with a goat head. So he's got no hair here, boobies here, and then all the way down he's got a penis with a set of balls and then goat legs that are hairy. So literally he's like, I don't know, it's like a satyr almost, but without being a full satyr. You know, if you don't understand what a satyr is, it's a Greek mythology of it, you know, because satyrs don't look actually like a human. They're an upright goat, is the best way to put it this way. But they're not a crossbreed. They literally just are literally a goat that stands full upright in a human form. They don't have human features like breast, a penis that sticks out. They literally have a goat penis, which is a different classification because their goats are almost the same definition of cows, horses, dogs, and a couple other animals that are mammals in that manner because their penis doesn't actually sit on the outside of their body like ours do. Theirs are inside of a sleeve of skin, so it's a bit different of how they construct. But this version of Baal has a human penis. It's not a goat penis, it's a human penis. And there's statues of it all across North America, Europe, and everywhere. You can look it up online. It's disturbing. And sometimes they have pictures and people... I actually saw a girl actually have this tattooed on her body. The full construct. You know, it's like... I wish she knew what this entity really was. Because this entity is disgusting. So, Baphomet is another demonic entity. And so is Moloch. Moloch and Baal are sometimes considered either sexual partners or friends because they're in some kind of polygamy relationship with Baphomet. Baphomet's a female goddess by some demonic forms, and Baphomet is a goddess of fertility, orgy, and other sexual parameters. Okay, and then Baal is considered the worship of Baal. He has some other kind of demonic forms. He's also referred to as Beelzebub, if I can pronounce it right, the Lord of Flies. He has multiple different definitions because he has got a literally almost, what's the term for it? So you would almost think of it as schizophrenia, where you have multiple states of minds. He's got multiple states of consciousness, I guess you could say, because that's the form of transgenderism. Transgenderism has multiple states of mind because they don't actually have a straight, clear picture of what they want. They are all over the place in a sense. So to picture it is, right, well, Baphomet convinces humans they can have sexual interactions with each other, mass-producing orgies to have babies, and she's a fertility goddess, right? Even though she's mass-producing it. Her partner Moloch, right, which is a bull, he looks like a representative of a cow with a human penis, right? He demands you to sacrifice babies that are breastfeeding brand new babies to be given to him by actually sitting there slaughtering them, draining their blood, doing this whole satanic ritual activity, right? And this is biblical. You can actually look at this in the Bible. They were doing this in Israel a long time ago. And not just Israel. There are other countries that were around the world that were doing this for a very long time. Cow worshipping has been around for centuries. Anybody who's a big cow worshiper, we're not talking like, Indians worship cows in the sense that they think they're divine and holy. I'm talking about the idea of sitting there worshiping a cow and sacrificing babies to cows. That's Moloch, okay? That is what the definition of Moloch. What the Indians do is a little bit different, and they don't actually sit there and sacrifice babies to cows. They sit there and praise them like they're God's pets or they're God's angels in a sense. That's a different definition, okay? That may be a different type of idling, but it's still completely different than a demonic possession of a form where we take a brand new freshly baby and then sit there and chop its head off and drain its blood in front of a demonic statue to say, worship this entity, right? I don't see Indians doing that, honestly. I don't see Indians sitting there chopping a baby in front of a cow and saying, oh, holy divine one, take this blessing. No. A lot of Christians like to imply that kind of stuff, and it's like, no. There is a lot of cow worshiping in India, yes, but they don't worship them like they're the holy divine God. They worship them as if they're messengers or they're a creature created by God and they're blessed and they're holy. Things like that, right? A lot of people think, oh, they don't believe in the same God as us. Well, they don't really believe in the same God as us, but they believe in the same definition of the creator of the universe. That there's an almighty creator. There's a one conscious entity that created all things. Every religion has this structure in the force of the universe. Every religion believes that there is one creator. One creator. Doesn't matter if you can give it 1,000 different names, it's still one creator, right? Christianity is the only culture in the world that have actually taken that religion and modified it, not because they've actually indoctrinated their religion, it's because they've incorporated the definition that there's a physical construct to the creation of how the creator works and a physical construct which is through Christ. Christ is an addition to the formula, meaning that there is a bridge between God and physical self. There's a bridge. That's what Christ is for, is a connection between both so that it's not separated any longer. Because for a very long period of time, humanity has decided from saying, oh, God's so holy and God's so blessed, and then saying, by God, we don't care about you, even though you created us, but now we're going to focus on worshiping these demonic entities who have given us a god lot of amount of information and god lot about things and other things. A lot of people think, oh, they give us technology or they give us the ability to build roads or bridges or agriculture and stuff like that. No, what these entities have given us is authority, power, control. In order to do so, you have to go sacrifice a baby or demand that you want to get a penis change into a vagina or a vagina into a penis in front of these gods, and then they give you that power, and then all suddenly you go out and continuously manipulating other people to do so for it, and that causes a whole bunch of other sodomy and stuff that's horrible. But to go back in the whole circle between Baphomet, Baal, and Moloch is, so we have the Baphomet likes to produce babies. She's goddess of fertility and goddess of all that kind of stuff. Moloch takes the babies after they're done being prosecuted in that way. And Baal likes sexual interactions with babies, meaning any kind of sexual interaction you can possibly imagine. That is what Baal does. That's what he's number one for. He's about sex, all of it, all kinds of sexual fantasies you can possibly imagine that violates the human body. So, for example, if I'm having sex with a partner and it's in a divine unity, and I'm doing it, with the connection, we're in agreement that this can be done, then that is not a demonic form. If I'm sitting there raping someone or molesting them, that is a demonic form. That means I'm violating their own consciousness. I'm not violating their own rights to live. And because of that, Baal is the one that actually takes the energy from that, especially when it comes to a child, because they feed on lust, and that lust is provided to the person that's doing it, and then Baal comes in and it sees the energy and says, I'm happy. I'm excited because this is an opportunity for me to take and go run with it, right? Well, what happens to the baby next in the ancient ritual activity is it's been thrown to Moloch. Moloch has it sacrificed, and then the cycle continues back to Baphomet, and a bunch of humans start having orgies, and the cycle continues back and forth in this three-cycled circle. But these three demonic entities are polygamy with each other, where they actually have sexual interactions with each other, where they don't care what your opinion is, they're sexually intercoursing with all three of each other in this way to make sure the cycle is continued, because they need worshippers. Without worshippers, they don't exist, literally. And that is the biggest problem right now, is we have so many people on this planet that worship them, especially ones that are blindly worshiping them. A large majority of the transgender people out there are worshiping Baal, not even realizing they're worshiping Baal. A lot of people that are out there are doing sexual stuff to children are worshiping Baal. A lot of people that are having sexual orgies with multiple different groups of people are worshiping Baphomet, not even realizing it. A lot of people who are having sacrifices, all kinds of different kinds of sacrifices, are worshiping Moloch. So if you sacrifice anything, animals or humans of any type, you're worshiping Moloch. If you're sacrificing, or not sacrificing, but if you're having sexual interactions with an underage minor, sexually going against their own will, transgenderism of any kind, performing some weird satanic sexual activities, that's Baal, that's worship of Baal. Baphomet is the definition of having multiple relationships, having orgies, mass producing children. So I could have, say for example, I'm a black guy that has sex with 3 different women, and I have 8 or 9 different children. Not realizing that you're still worshiping Baphomet. That's the definition of it. People need to start realizing that they've been worshiping demonic entities for as far back as they can possibly imagine. The reason why we've been blind and brainwashed not to believe this is real stuff is because the worshippers that did it a long time ago knew that eventually at some point they had to masquerade and hide it. Not because they were going to kill or slaughter, just because they had to change the names to it. Because they had to change the idea that, worshipping Baal is now transgenderism. Rape and sodomy has to be changed to a different name so that nobody would say, oh, you're sodomizing a child, or, oh, you're transgendering, someone, right? Where the old term is actually, you're a worshiper of Baal. You can't sit there and just say, hey, Baal worshiper, how's it going, right? Because that's disturbing. Sitting there in the public and saying, what's up, goat whoopersher? We're going up to a person that is slaughtering animals or a child for a demonic god that looks like a man goat, or not a man goat, but a man bull, that looks like a cow, and sitting there saying, hey, Moloch worshiper, how's it going? What's up, life? The entity that Baphomet looks like is kind of hard to construct her. She's more of a satanic worshipping lizard, crocodile-like entity, if I can understand it right. There's a little bit more to her structure. I don't exactly know what her form looks like because it's not fully described. I mean, maybe the Bible has more depiction on what she looks like as a demonic form, because worshippers of these demonic religions actually are the reasons why that we know what they look like. Because, well, if you look at Moloch, he's a cow man thing, right? We know that he looks like this because that's what worshippers think that's what he appears to look like. Doesn't mean that actually is his actual form, but that is his form that he wants people to believe he is. It's the same thing as Baal. Baal doesn't actually really look like a goat. He looks more like an energy-ejected form, like he's just a mass of energy. But he convinces his followers he looks like a goat man, so that way they have something to perceive as a real force of a threat, so that if they violate him or they go against him after worshiping him, they'll be punished. Because they've decided to walk away. You can walk away from these demonic entities, yes, no matter how far you're down the road, but there's a certain point where you're kind of locked into this and you're not allowed to leave, because it has to do with the perspective of where you're at and how much enjoyment you get out of it. So if you're one of those people that says, I like doing things to children, and you don't want to see the recognition that that's wrong, you're not walking away from that anytime soon. You're not going to change your mind. You're not going to actually accept God is the truth and this is wrong. If you like sacrificing animals or humans for whatever reason and you enjoy it, you're not walking away from it. You're going to be doing that for as long as it takes until you're stopped. The same thing with sexual orgies and other kinds of weird practices and that kind of definition. You're not going to stop doing that until never, because you're going to accept that as your normal reality. But that's been a whole hour worth of video. Probably want to chop it down to 10-minute videos. So that means 10 videos going to be putting up. So thank you guys for watching my definitions of explaining certain things, and be aware that this is a real crisis that's going on. We have to start getting into these kind of topics, because if we don't start getting into these kind of things and start talking about them, what actually happens is people become brainwashed and suckered into these things and accept them as normal reality. We can't let this stuff happen, because these people are losing. They're losing a game. They're losing this entire war. And you think, okay, well, since they're losing, I can step back. No, because here's why. There's two types of warfare when it comes to losing. One, if you win on the surface, but you're losing, down below in the places where you need to actually win people's hearts, the surface is just nothing. It means nothing. It literally means nothing at all. So in the definition of what means from darkness comes light, what that means doesn't mean that, God came out of darkness. No, it means we live in a darkness world, a world casted with darkness constantly, but only light can seep through. But the light has to come from within it, the darkness. Something like, for example, imagine a dark room, and there's billions of people in this dark room. They're sitting there sleeping, they're slumbering. They don't want to wake up. They don't want to do anything. They don't want to face reality. They don't want to realize they're doing whatever they are told to do by some demonic force that says, do these things and your life will be whatever it is, right? There's going to be a certain portion of people or a certain value of small number of individuals who decide, wait, I'm awake. I can't see anything, but I'm awake. I know I'm awake. They start questioning things. They start getting it to the point where I know there's more to life. I know there's more to myself. I know there's something else here. And eventually they start sparking. They start turning into a spark of light. And eventually the darkness says, that guy's a problem. But eventually they realize that even though they can spark, they don't have much power because they're surrounded. It's not because you're a weak, frail individual. It's because you're surrounded by enemies on all fronts. Like, there's no way away from you. Like, it's the same concept as when you leave your home, because you can pray and bless your home. You can do whatever you want on your home to protect yourself. But the moment you leave your house, you're going to be bombarded with all kinds of negative possessions, entities, forces, you can name it. They're going to attack you constantly. They're going to bring you down. The worst part is other people have already been subdued by this problem, and there are the people you're trying to save, but they're always the ones that are attacking you. That's the problem. So in this sense, if you're in a room full of darkness and there's a bunch of other people around you that are sleeping, that are unknowingly aware of this problem, they're asleep and you're waking up to the truth, and you know that they're asleep and you want to wake them up. It's, to put it in perspective, if you actually physically try and wake up another person, it's like going into a bedroom and your wife is asleep, right? Take a flashlight, shine it in her face, and you figure out what that looks like, right? You piss her off because she doesn't like that idea, That's literally what waking someone up is. You cause a backlash against you, such a nasty environment to experience, right? But once she's fully awake and she realizes that you woke her up and she can start seeing this dark room around her, there's almost nothing really to see, and she can see you because you're shining. You're like this bright aura that's just bright light because you decided to allow the brightness of light inside of you. You've allowed to allow that spark to illuminate. She can see that, and therefore she wants to be like that. But then since she starts looking at you, she can see these other people sleeping because of that. And then she starts realizing, wait, these are the people who are asleep too? I was asleep too? And then you start telling her, I was asleep too. I'm not this bright light because I was born like that. I became this because I decided I no longer wanted to be asleep. I wanted to be more than what I am now. So by that choice, you wake up. You start realizing it. And that's where the consciousness bridge of Christ comes in. Because as a physical flesh form, we're surrounded by darkness. We're not fully 100% able to just light up and just be a beacon everywhere because we're struck. We're stuck in the middle of this darkness. To fully become that beacon, we have to have something that helps in between so that it makes us bright. So in that definition is eventually the people that are awake will start seeing beams constantly throughout the pitch of blackness, and they'll realize there's other awakened individuals that are trying to do the best they can, but they can't go. It's like, how to put it this way, it's like imagine a hallway full of sharp knives and needles, and you have to walk all the way down it and back and forth 1,000, a million different times. Doesn't matter how many times you want to describe it. You have to walk up and down this hallway, right, without getting cut. Imagine those sharp knives are the people that are still asleep, and you have to walk by them. Your presence is what will wake them up. Your just being around them will slowly start waking them up, starts telling them, there's more. However, on the off chance that you bump into one of them, you'll get attacked, you'll get stabbed, you'll get hurt. However, it's like a battlefield. It is not a guaranteed chance you'll wake them up. It's more like they're in self-defense mode. They're going to attack you. They're going to kill you. They're going to do whatever they can to stay asleep. That's all that matters to them. And then eventually, you're going to walk up to somebody that is pure blackness. Like you cannot see anything. Like you cannot see them. They're just like a black veil of something dark. And that's because they're not blindly doing the things they're doing it consciously, and they're knowing what they're doing, and it is pure satanically evil. I mean, we're talking about the most satanic thing possible, like child sacrifice. We're talking about worship of demonic forces that are on another level than what anybody can talk about publicly. We're talking about going into places where they actually sit there and talk to demonic beings that are actually standing there in front of them, and these demonic beings actually have conversations with these entities, back and forth between these, humans, and they're fully aware of it, and they make agreements that, oh, well, if you do these things for me, like if you go out and sacrifice a child or have sexual interactions with someone, then I'll make you rich, I'll make you famous, I'll make you become a politician, right? It doesn't matter what your opinion is, there are deals that can be made, and, they have TV shows all about them, like Supernatural talks about demons having deals with humans, right? Well, that is not a mere fantasy. There are some biblical things that are talked about it. Like, for example, the biggest thing that ever happened in the entire Bible is the deal that was made between Jesus and Satan, right? Jesus never agreed to the deal. However, Satan prompted him a deal. Had stated, I can't remember the full deal, but he basically said, if you go do this, I will do whatever, right? But Jesus knew that there was a catch to this. There was a catch 22, and he knew that he was going to get shot in the mouth in a sense. Not like, he was actually going to get shot, but he knew that for no matter what reason at all, he knew that Satan's not being truthful, and he's going to play a trick and then, hurt him or hurt humanity. So Jesus didn't play along. He decided to be like, oh, well, I'm consciously aware of what you're doing, but I'm going to trick you myself. Because the only trick can be done on consciousness, Christ itself. The only trick that can be done is Christ actually fully perceiving it and then basically going around behind you, and you can't see Christ doing this, and then it flips the page so that you're like, wait, what? Completely alternating the situation, because it's a bit more challenging to explain exactly what that means, but basically, for example, is Satan didn't realize what Christ was doing, because the point being is Satan believed, or he could try to manipulate Jesus to think that he was not actually Christ and he had no connection to God. That was his goal. But the funny thing is, it's actually written biblically that Jesus knew that was the intention of Satan the entire time. But Jesus wasn't able to reveal it, not because he didn't want to, it's because Satan can't see it, so why explain it to him? Jesus was already connected to God in such a way that at the time that when Satan approached him to say, "Oh, well, you're not God yet, so therefore we can, junk around. We can do all kinds of really, stupid things, and you can't get in trouble for it by God at all." Well, Jesus already knew all the things, and he already knew what he was attempting to go after, and because of it, Satan didn't realize that he was already within God when he was, making this deal. So Jesus could literally understand full spectrum of what was going on. Like he could actually see what Satan's full intentions were. Like it was almost like he could read his thoughts. And a lot of people think, well, that's not how it really happened. Well, your perspective is based on limited mere information. One is because Satan has a physical form. Remember, he was an angelic form before he was this, and he's been casted down, so that means he has a physical form. He's not allowed to change his form. He cannot be back into pure energy because of the construct that he's been forced into. So by that definition is, yeah, there was an actual conversation between Jesus and the entity we call Satan, whatever that looked like. He didn't look like he had a devil tail, horns, or whatever. He looked something, I want to say undescribable, but he looked more humanoid in that form because remember, he was an angel, which angels energy or, something that's a construct of light, because all things that God creates are a construct of light, but diminishes when you walk into darkness. So that's why when we say we have to wake people up, we have to become light, because that's what we really are. That's what we really are created from, is light. God is light. That's all that will ever exist in the entire universe is light. That's all that will ever exist. The reason why there's darkness is because there's a whole other parameter how that exists. It's not because God created darkness, it's because something took place, because some physical form started creating something like that, meaning it's a little more complicated. I can't really get into it, not because I don't know what I'm talking about, just because everybody has their own perspective on it, and we're going to all bash each other whether or not that's true or not. But the whole point being is that's exactly what happened. Is there was a physical conversation that took place between the entity we call Lucifer, Satan, or whatever you want to call him, right? And I will also say Lucifer, Satan, whatever you want to call it, is not Baal, Moloch, or Baphomet. Those are princes, in a sense. They're not actually Satan. Satan's a whole different entity, and he's a physical entity. Now, do Baal, Baphomet, Moloch, are they physical entities too? It's a very well possibility, because they're demonic forms, and they were once angels, according to the Bible, that 1/3 of heaven fell onto the earth, and they were deemed not Nephilim by everybody's opinion, right? These constructed people. No, Nephilim is when fallen angels have sexual interactions with humans. A lot of people think that's when they create giants. No, it's a whole different construct. Of giants are different than Nephilim. Nephilim are something entirely else. We think Nephilim would have been superstructured beings, means they were 700 feet tall. A lot of people like to think they're a little bit shorter, but no, we're talking about massive monstrosity entities that were catastrophically large. Very, very large. And a lot of people think, well, that makes the firmament idea as a reality. No, there's a more definition that our planet's atmosphere was much, much larger at one point. In fact, it was so much more larger that the oxygen density on this planet was so thick that literally, if I decided to cut you open and you would think you'd bleed out within hours, you would die, right? That's what your opinion is. But in a thicker, rich oxygen, your cells would suck up so much air so quickly, not from the hole that I just cut into your body, but from breathing, and it would start massively producing cellular growth. Like we're talking about healing factor, like 3 to 5 times stronger. I could literally cut my finger off and my cells would actually regrow bone tissue, which is not physically possible in our limited state of reality. But because of the oxygen environment at that time, yes, it was possible. This was what we call the garden age of life, when there was access to this kind of knowledge, this kind of ability. Adam and Eve had abilities that were far measurable than our physical construct, because I'm pretty sure they've had accidents and they were healing capabilities beyond our measurement. But however, there was a loss to that. And to further cut that, phrase out of life was Noah's flood. Noah's flood happened. A lot of the trees, a lot of the plants that were massively producing larger atmosphere are gone. They're dead. So that would allow for the transformation of a changing of planet. But I've explained enough. I need to go eat. But you have an hour of video to conversate and watch through. But yeah, that's exciting information to know, that you need to be paying attention to the stuff that's going on around you and start realizing that there is truth to reality. That there are conscious light beings out there who we call angels. And I'm not saying that isn't a modern tone of definition, but there are consciousness light beings, and there are dark beings that were once light but now are dark, and pure dark, that they just simply want to masquerade around you to the point where they suffer you. They put a blanket over you where you cannot see other light. You cannot even see your own light. You're suffocating, and the fence to the point where you shrivel down and you fall asleep and you stay asleep, right? But you're more or less born into darkness. That's what the Bible talks about. You're born into darkness, but you're only raised out of it through light. You're literally reawakened. The definition in the Bible, when it says you die, it doesn't talk about you dying in flesh. It says you dying spiritually, being born again in light. What that means is, while you're asleep in the darkness, your death is taking place. But when you wake up and the light begins to literally flicker inside of you, it means you're awakening spiritually. You're awakening this inner force. You're alive. You're becoming alive. You're no longer dead. And in literal sense, it's literally like you're, what's his name in front of the Bible that Jesus raised from the dead? Lazarus. Lazarus was physically dead. There was not a cell in his body that was alive. And a lot of people like to credit to the idea that, maybe he was just dead for a couple of days or a couple of hours and his heart was at a slower pace. No, he was fully dead. Jesus literally spoke into him by using a spiritual construct of light to literally call forth the construction of what God truly is by saying, let this man be alive. It's not really like the idea that he's commanding God to do. It's more like he's in one with God, and therefore his voice is whatever his will is due. It's not like he's telling God what to do. It is simply he is speaking as God. Literally, that's the best physical construct without getting into other things that would make people think that's really hard to accept or challenge to believe, right? Well, by any construct of this happening, of whatever your opinion is, Lazarus was physically dead, and then he came to life. And it was more than enough time for him to be dead. It's the same thing as Jesus, right? Jesus had enough time to die on the cross. I mean, he was in agony. He had literally barely any water. He had no food. He was almost down to bare bones. Like, he was skinny, like really skinny, because he barely had any water. They fed him vinegar. It was either vinegar or wine, which distillated his body, so he had no liquid inside of his body, and he was basically rotting at that point. Like he looked like a toothpick, in a sense. And because they wrapped him up and then threw him in a cave, which wasn't really a cave, it was more like a hole that was turned into, not really a tomb, as everybody likes to prefer it as. It's only considered a tomb because of a diagram that's where Jesus died, right, bro? No, he died on the cross. So they buried him inside this construction because they don't build tombs like, they used to, in a sense, where nowadays we think that underground caves or underground structures are tombs. It actually has a different definition for it. What they were putting his body inside of was an archive to preserve him. Why? Because they believed that all things that were divine, or all things that should belong to God, belong in preservation things. Like, if we have an archive of knowledge, right, we have to go preserve it inside of an ark in a sense, right? We have to preserve it. It's a long tradition of that kind of thing. The only reason why it was considered a tomb is because they posted 2 legionnaires outside of this tomb and told them they had to watch it and make sure he would never leave, because the Pharisees believed that he was some kind of wizard, and I'm not joking. They believed that he could resurrect himself and he could cast demons from hell onto them. They came up with some weird philosophies by claiming Jesus was evil because he could do things that they were scared about. So when they had him executed, they were afraid that he was going to walk up from the dead and kill everybody. Like, he was afraid he was going to be a zombie. Like, these people came up with some weird shit. I mean, we're talking about some weird stuff. They were afraid, but not entirely wrong, because he did wake up and he came back to life, and the Pharisees were like, oh, no, that can't be possible. There's no way we had you executed. Like, what's going on here? This is all mental. Like, oh my God, like, what's going on? We just, we paid for you to die. Well, this cannot be possible, right? Eventually the Pharisees decided that this small portion, we're talking about maybe a few, that said, okay, this is the child. This is the creation of what God had intended for all life. This is what God's plan is. So this is really a divine force of God. They changed because of this. Those few Pharisees had actually changed, become what we call Christ followers. They were no longer considered the traditional Jew. They became Christ-like. They started practicing Christ-like activities. They didn't fully become what Christ had intended for humanity. Almost none of them became it, except for the original disciples, which are the original 12. I don't know if Judas became any close to that, but at least John and Peter and Paul were the only ones very well closest to it. There was also a couple others that were very, very close to they had spiritual understanding, they have other gifts, but they never really came as close as Jesus wanted them to, but they got to be really, really, really close. And then it kind of collapsed in that kind of structure where a lot of people were meant to be, realizing they had all these kind of abilities and, spiritual constructs they had to start diving into. But however, like all religions, people get turned into idols. So, for example, Paul became an idol, and Paul said, knock it off. You don't want to worship me. I'm not a god. He didn't want to be worshipped. He didn't want to be idoled. Peter was worshiping an idol. People had to tell him to knock it off. I mean, Mary Magdalene, she's an idol. She didn't want to be an idol. She said, please do not worship me. She said, just because I had a relationship with Jesus Christ doesn't mean you have to believe that I'm a divine force. She didn't want people to like her like that. They wanted to know her for who she was, the way that she was in life, for the way that she came to Christ, how that happened. She wanted people to know that, but no, the Vatican Church has turned her into a sculpture and of an icon, or an idol. Literally, there's her skull's on display. Like, you can literally look it up. She's got her skull in this kind of like vacuum sealed structure, like it's a glass face. Like, it's full glass. It looks like an astronaut suit, honestly. I'm not saying this because they're trying to say that she's an alien. I'm saying, like, she's the only thing that's visible is her skull, and everything else of her bones are inside this glass case that is covered with gold to keep her alive, to keep her bones from not deteriorating. But her bones look like they have got crap all over it. Like, it doesn't look nice because the flesh has become all mangled down to the bone, where it's all dried up to where it's all brown. That's literally rotten tissue because it was vacuum sucked to the point where I don't want to say it's not rotten tissue. It's decomposition process have taken place so much that there is nothing left, and there's no oxygen. That means since there's no oxygen, there's no air, there's no growth for bacteria, so that means there's no mold, there's no other things, but it is simply just basically just this rotten stuff that's not rotten, I keep saying rotten, but decomposed structure on the skin, so that you could actually take a sample of her blood off of her bone structure, because that's all that's left is this tissue that is literally down to the skin. Like, if she had a tattoo, I'm not saying that she would have had a tattoo, but you could see it on her bones, because the skin has wrapped around all of her bones from this decomposure process. If it wasn't for embalming, which is a process of injecting fluid into the physical body after death, a decomposing process would have taken place. And they would have probably done this to Mary Magdalene's body if they had the process at that time, because she's an idol now. She did not ask for it to be an idol. She never permissioned her body to be an idol. The people that were underneath her started worshiping her like a god, and she said to knock it off. There was many other people. I mean, Peter had sent letters to churches. He told churches to knock it off. Paul sent letters to churches to knock it off, because a lot of them started idling people. They started idling beyond Jesus. I mean, Jesus didn't want people to idol his physical form. They wanted to understand his consciousness form, what he actually is as God. And they're like, we want to worship you as a man, because you're superhuman. You're like a god. And we're not talking about like the god. We're talking about a god that's like, Zeus, Thor, or God, like Ra, or Hades, or like the Roman god Sol, or Athena, which is a Greek god. But I'm talking about like Jupiter, Neptune, or Luna. Those are Roman gods. The Greek gods are a different construct of different aspects of his creations, but they try to worship him like he's that kind of a god. And Paul, excuse me, and Peter had told them to knock it off, because that's not the definition of Christianity. Because a lot of them were trying to worship him that it was like a normal religion. Like, you go to a church, you make a donation, a sacrifice, and you say, oh, I make my prayers, and then you go back to your normal life and just do whatever, right? That's not the intention of what you're supposed to be doing. But, yeah. Alright, well, I'm going to end my video. I'm going to upload this information. I'm going to let people take it apart from there. And I'm going to go ahead and eat my dinner, because I should have eaten it 26 minutes ago. But I had to get the information out. It felt like the presence of the Holy Spirit telling me that I needed to start doing this again, because it's time. It's time for Christ to actually start showing, how to put it this way without getting the very kind of topic. But the point being is, Christ is ready to reveal his master plan. It isn't much time left on this entire planet for that to take place. And we're not talking like, oh, it's going to happen next year, the year from now. No, I'm talking about his time is planned to start to be physical. Like, you're going to start seeing a lot of his physical plans take place, because it is like playing chess. This planet's like playing chess, but in a 5D aspect, or a 6D or a 9D aspect, which the D stands for dimensional, meaning basically you take the physical structure of what we call third dimension, which is not time, space, matter, but it's the physical forms of matter on all three sides, on the spectrum, because you have that three sides, but you don't know you're in a third dimension. But if you get into a fourth dimension, you can see all the things around it, including through the matter of itself. So solid matter is not solid in a fourth dimensional consciousness. You can see through it. Then you get to fifth dimensional consciousness, which is a fifth dimension environment, which you can actually visit according to science. That it's a construct that you can literally not only see the fourth dimension, aware of the presence of it, but you can also interact with all the dimensions before it and some of the dimensions above it, but not all the way above it, just a few above it. And then you all go, 9, your pure energy, your state of divinity and stuff like that, and you have access to basically anything according to some of the science and spiritual information provided by cultures around the world. But basically, to the construct is, it's like the dimensions of heaven. A lot of people think, what are you talking about? The Bible talks about 7 layers of heaven, 7 realms of heaven. So if there are 7 layers of heaven, what's the first layer? A lot of people think that's where Jesus is at. Some people believe he's already up at the very top of the layer where God is at. I can't tell you exactly where it's at. You have to seek that out, the information yourself, because if I try to tell you one thing, you're going to either twist it or you're going to be misled, not by my perception, but by the perception you gain off of it. Like the same example with Peter, Paul, and Mary Magdalene, as they were trying to teach what Christ was about, and then also they twisted this form, the followers of Christ, they twisted the form of what they believed Jesus was about, And then Paul, Peter, and Mary Magdalene had to go back and say, that is not what happened, and that's not how it works, and that is not acceptable. That is not the definition of Christ-like. That is not the way that Christ wanted us to do things. So, by that definition is, I'm not going to interject in trying to manipulate you on to view certain things, because you're going to try and take it a different way, not because you forcibly want to, because that's the way the construct of human works, is we like to take pieces and put it into a basket and say, oh, look at that, that's how it's supposed to work. But that's not actually how it works, right? We do this for stupid reasons. But I'm going to go ahead and go watch the video, check it out, and if it's on YouTube, leave a like. If it's on Facebook, check out the other ones, because I'm going to have to break them down to smaller sections because the time and length. But you get it. Awesome. Have a great time. Thank you. And absolutely love and pray for everybody, and be thankful for being a part of this light warfare that was going on, because our brothers and sisters are still trapped in darkness, and we have to defend them because they are important. By the way, if you heard that sound, that's my dog, because she just woke up from a nap. But still, no matter what, we have to save our brothers and sisters that are trapped in darkness, because they are fully unaware of what's going on. But thank you, and participate in this light warfare by setting your salvation straight. Christ is the way. Thank you.